any treatment of Noah really needs to begin in Genesis 5, which is sort of a transition. When we read the Bible, regardless of any particular spiritual import it might have for you, we need to go through it page by page and always say, okay, what's going on here? And what purpose does this serve? Now, when you're reading stuff that, when you're reading stuff that is so familiar to so many people, it can be a little yada yada, like, oh yeah, that. No, it's the boat, right? And it conjures up all these associations, and that's bad. It can be very good from a religious and spiritual and whatever frame of mind. But what we want to do is look at it, all of these texts, everything we read this semester, to be perfectly honest, from our own perspective, and to say, well, yeah, what's this doing? You got to read it like it's your very first time, which for some of you it might be. And when you get to Genesis 5, you get not much of a story, really. The Genesis starts with, a bang, literally, the creation of the universe. Genesis 2, you get people showing up. It goes on, you get the nice little story about the serpent and sinning, and Adam and Eve suddenly realizing they're naked. It's a nice little story. We like stories as a human being. Once the story ends, we can think about it and digest it and say, well, okay, this is what that story means. This is what I think that story means. Other people are going to say something a little different. But then you get something like Genesis 5, which has no story at all. What's the purpose? It is basically a long list of names. And all the days of Adam that he lived were 930 years, and he died. And Seth, his son, lived 105 years, and he begot Enosh. And Seth lived after he begotten Enosh 807 years, and he begot sons and daughters. And all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. It's weird that it's the exact same phrasing from one line to the next. I find that a little weird. Why? I don't know about you, but when I was in middle school, I was told that you shouldn't repeat the same form of a sentence. You should try and vary it because, people, we like variety. And Enosh lived 90 years, and he begot Kenan, not Thompson. And Enosh lived after he had begotten Kenan 815 years, and he begot sons and daughters. Again, that same repetition. Kind of dull. That's just me talking. I don't know about you, but I find that kind of dull. All of the begotten. It's not moving a story along. You're just getting a list of names. Names of the boys only. What's that about? And it's the exact same phrasing. One after the other after the other. What are we learning from this? What is the point of this? Anyway, suggestions. I know this isn't in the book we're reading, but this is just one of those first blush things. What the hell is this? Anyway. I see a hand. Sure. What? What's your name?
Justin.
Hi, Justin.
I guess long time ago humans lived 930 years.
Yeah? Yeah?
Or at least had a different concept of what a year was.
Yeah, well,
Probably that one.
If you've been in South Florida recently, you know that it's pretty close to that today. But what do you notice about the numbers, though?
The numbers of the years or of the, on the left?
The years. How long is Adam living?
930 years.
Yeah! Seth lived 105 years before he had Enosh. New dad at 105 years. Of course, he probably wasn't doing any of the work. And after that, he lived another 807 years. $912 total, less than 930. Enosh lived 90 years and begot Kenan, again, not Thompson. I know he's been around forever, but not that one. All the days of Enosh were 905. What?
Well, I've noticed the years are confusing.
Yeah. Why? Fast food? Maybe.
What did you say?
The years are confusing.
Oh, is it that no one can exceed Adam's years lived?
Repeat
Both.
that again.
That no one can exceed Adam. It is a steady descent, if you will. Adam, who was the first, the child of God, in a way, cannot be topped. But we are getting progressively inching towards normal lifespan. These names just keep coming up. What?
I remember there was a rough paraphrasing in one of the excerpts, but there was something that mentioned that God was going to lead the flesh of man over time. So that could be an example of that.
Yeah. Adam is special. The big guy, top dog. And each generation is, in its own way then, a degeneration. They are becoming more recognizable, more human. To the point that, as you point out, in a couple of chapters, God's going to start to say, well, yeah, I'm going to be scaling back a little bit more and making them even more human. What is the purpose of that?
To put it simply, you live and you learn. You can't be 100% sure of anything when you first start. Things have to change over time. Meaning, from the perspective of God who created everything, you might not have been right away. Maybe it took them a little while to figure it out.
Stick a pin in that idea. Yeah. God is experiment, working on it. When you have a line connecting, think about the effect of that. Adam begot Seth, Seth begat Enosh, Enosh begot Kenan, Kenan begot Mo, Mo begot Curly, Curly begot Shemp. I forgot Larry, but too bad. A slow stretch into the modern day. Shemp begot, let's say, Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey begot Adam Sandler. Adam Sandler begot Andy Samberg. I'm pretty sure those are even the same two people. It shows a continuum. It shows a connection to Adam. Because by the time you get down to Kenan's great-grandkids, you know, oh, Adam. Oh, I don't want to hear about him again. Oh, Grandpa Kenan's going on about the good old days again. Who really cares? But the connection is a lifeline.
Question. So like in like medieval times, when people were like, or even like I'm referencing like a Game of Thrones type thing. When people are like, oh, I'm John, son of Luke, or like, and they just reference that, and like the long titles that people used to have.
A lot of that goes to, if you want to jump forward, a lot of that does go to the fact that there really weren't last names.
Yeah.
So, you know, John's son, it's just easier to say, hi, my last name is Johnson. You know. But it is essentially that same thing. It is showing a connection, it is showing a family, literally. So that you have Adam, and you begot, 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 and you begot. All the way over here, those people can still look back and say, well, yeah, I'm a direct line to Adam, who is, of course, the handmade, handcrafted product of God. But at the same time, think about the effect of that repetition. The begot, and 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 the begot. One after the other. And all those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Makes you feel connected to Adam, but it also kind of makes you feel far, far away. Isn't that really, you know, the human condition to go big? Where we feel that our connection to something perfect, our connection to something primal, to something divine, might be very, very tangible to us, but at the same time, we feel so far away. That, by the way, is an extraordinarily medieval idea. Because we're never sure. Does God like us? Does he not? You know, you can read that Garden of Eden story a number of different ways about, you know, God being on our side. Oops. but that sense of the continuity and the sense of don't be too sure of yourself. That lives in all of the so-called, Western faiths, and in fact, a bunch of others. Is this not? All right, let's try this one more time. Yay! Why is that down there? That's annoying. So this, going from that nice, neat little story of the Garden of Eden, creation, Adam and Eve, serpent, sin, and then connective tissue. Reminding you of how far away all that is, even while stratifying the connection. Brings you to Noah. Noah, we are told, is 10 generations removed from Adam. He is the first born after Adam's death. Why do we need to know that? What does that suggest to us? Is that a nice little factoid that's supposed to humanize Noah? Oh, his great-great multiplied by whatever great-grandfather never got to hold him. And he felt insecure about that for his whole life. Is that the purpose?
Did I signal a new era?
Oh, a new era. Yeah. Noah is the first patriarch, is the word. I know it's sexist, but that's part of it. Noah is the first patriarch after Adam. Noah is, in a way, the next generation. He is Genesis 2.0. And what do we know about him? It's a fairly well-known story. Whether you actually did this reading or not, what do you know about him? Justin!
Noah's Ark.
Noah's Ark! Yeah! The guy with the boat.
All the animals.
Yeah! It's adorable. The animals, the 2x2 thing, the boat. What's that? It's sadistic? Little bit. We'll get there.
Sorry, I can't come. You have to die.
He actually, he got the message from God to do this.
Yeah. It's handy having so few people around on the earth. One-to-one with God. Just raise your hand. Oh, Noah, there you are. Yeah. But Noah stands out for another reason. What is it? What's your name? Yeah.
My name's Roman.
Roman?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
We're gonna have fun when we get to Catullus. Go ahead.
From the reading, it mentioned that God said that all other people but Noah and his wife were corrupt.
Yeah. Yeah. And he uses that to justify he being God. What?
Murdering everyone besides Noah.
Yeah. So he's got a reason. You all suck. What?
Maybe it goes back to that trial and error concept.
Yeah. Trial and error. Very good. There are a number of flood stories from this era. It was not an original thing. When we get to Gilgamesh, you will see something remarkably similar. The actual dating and timing of any of these is pretty speculative, but they are clearly all coming out of the same place. Interestingly, for the flood story, where'd he go? No. Here. Interestingly, for the flood story, it is a largely Mesopotamian story that the Hebrews seem to take and adapt in some very crucial ways. Now, you can go through this with little objective perspectives like that and pick out a lot of ways in which this story does not quite seem like an historical record. This isn't somebody writing down what actually happened. The fact that they're copying the story from other sources, perhaps, or other sources may have been copying it from them, is significant, but it's more significant in the changes from one to the other than in the general idea of the flood story. You can pick out little things. Floods don't generally happen in the land we now associate with Israel. It's dry, it's hilly, not a lot of flooding going on. Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, sweet spot between the Tigris and Euphrates River, lots of floods. Low-lying, alternately rather marshy, given to floods. So right there you can see it's more likely to be coming out of that part of the world and imported into the Israel story. But they change certain things. In the story of Gilgamesh, which again we'll get to, the gods, plural, are just irritated with humanity. They're making so damn much noise. You know? Anybody who lives in an apartment knows the feeling about your neighbors. You just wish they would die. It's 1:30 in the morning, why are they watching television? It's capricious. Gods in the polytheistic world are often quite bitchy. And they just, I don't like these people, they're getting on my nerves, wipe them out. Except for that one guy over there. Remarkably similar story. The Hebrews don't do that. the Hebrew God, plural, or not plural, singular, I know what the word means, says, no, I'm going to wipe them out, but for a reason. And not the reason of my own crankiness. Not something that's just coming up out of me at all, but because they have somehow broken a universal law called morality. As God, my hands are tied. They did it to themselves. That moral law almost, here we're getting a little bit deep into the weeds, and I'm not going to go too far, almost predates God and is a guiding limit on divine power, or an interpretation of it that is supposed to guide humanity. It's a very knotty theological question that we're going with right there, but the important point is the Hebrews wanted to emphasize that God is not just cranky. God is just. The Hebrew God has to be just. In the polytheistic world, gods with very diverse powers are fighting one another and squabbling and being really, really annoying. We will see that in Gilgamesh. We'll definitely see that in Homer. But when you have a single God, who's he going to fight? Who's he going to argue with? He's not going to be cranky. He's going to be an embodiment of morality and justice that is absolute. That monotheistic spin on the story is essential. You can also go through this, and theologians do all the time, and ordinary readers too, and start to pick up on things and go, no, wait a minute. What the hell are Nephilim?
I'm a guess. I'm not sure. Is it like half angel, half human? I'm sorry. I watched the show and it said.
Okay.
They're fallen angels?
Fallen angels, half human. Sure. Who's going to prove you wrong? The whole notion of angels, and here we're really kind of tiptoeing into more Christian terminology, but the whole notion of angels is itself a complication when you're dealing with one God. Not in this story. What is the first commandment? No, they don't care about that. There's way too much violence in the old time. What is the first commandment? That's Exodus, that's after Genesis, so we're not going to get there. But what is the first commandment?
We don't know.
I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me.
Freedom of religion.
What?
Freedom of religion.
That's the First Amendment. You're getting them mixed up there.
Oh.
That was written in 1776. A little bit later. This is Moses coming down the mountain with the stones. I am the Lord your God, you shall have no other God before me. One God. And if you read all of the beginning of Genesis, they make a very specific point. There is one God. But there are little complications in there. Those ancient Hebrews are selling this monotheism thing in a very polytheistic neighborhood. So you start to shade things a little. You can come up with other ideas, other little imports here and there.
I have a question.
Shoot.
I'm trying to wrap my mind around when this was.
It's not going to be on your Google Calendar.
I know, it's just, it's, okay, so by how many years or eons or whatever, millennia, does this predate Jesus? I'm pretty familiar with his lineage after, but not before.
Well, there are a lot of different ways to answer the question. Again, you got to sort of separate
It's just who's going to record this?
What's that?
How do we get access to this recording? If it's so long ago.
Well, this is an important point. Again, there were no stenographers hanging around copying down what God said.
Right.
So, regardless of an area of faith or belief in any particular tradition, we need to push that aside and say, okay, I was taught in Sunday school X.
I did not go to Sunday school.
Okay.
I refuse to.
I loved sleeping late on Sundays myself, oddly enough. But you put that aside. We're looking at this, yes, from a more strictly secular and literary perspective of what this book, this text, to use a really anodyne word, does. Generally speaking, scholars agree that this was probably assembled. This text was assembled about the 10th century
No,
BCE.
not.
But when it actually happened,
I guess so, yeah.
they're writing about,
There's
you know,
history,
long ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's that general. You gotta let go of that. Reading this as history is remarkably complicated, even if you get over some of the "he lives how long?" questions.
Oh no, that doesn't stop me.
Okay, well,
it's just trying to make the connection up until the actual copies of written Bible.
Tuck Jesus away for now.
No, not Jesus. It's just, where does this story come from?
This comes from the Hebrew tribes wandering around that little neighborhood of the Middle East, telling stories to one another about where the hell did we come from? And what do we believe? Who are we? What makes us different from other people? And the difference is what this is all about. How are we special? What is our connection to God? Because we can see how distant it is. We want to be able to see that through line. So this story is about organizing that a little bit. And it is drawing a line from God to Adam to Seth to Enoch to whomever, to Mo, to Larry, I got him this time, to Curly, to Shemp, to Andy Samberg, to you. You're not related to Andy Samberg, are you? Okay. But it answers the way that all of the texts of the ancient world, quite frankly, answer is, it answers that basic question of who am I? Or more to the point, because there really wasn't much of an I in the ancient world. That's a very modern concept. Who are we? These are tribes. These are peoples. Sometimes they are identified within the text as nations. We're going to see that in Abraham. Trying to come up with a rationale for understanding what makes us different from other people. Why do we believe what we believe? Why do we do what we do? How can we make sense of this world? Because all I know is I get up in the morning and the sun is rising. And I don't know why. Why do storms happen? Why do floods happen? Floods are very destructive. Why? Just about every ancient religion has a storm god in the polytheistic range. And here in the monotheistic tradition, you have a god who speaks through storms, who does stuff, acts through storms, who will appear in nature as a storm, a cloud, a fire, smoke, some natural phenomenon, lightning. Just think of all the gods you've seen associated with lightning in every tradition. When you see that storm coming at you, then you feel really small. It's nice to think that, well, there's a logic to it. Because when you just see the destruction, when you flip on cable news and you see, a tornado ripped through Kentucky again today, and you see miles and miles and miles of debris, and you go, what the hell happened? What's to prevent that from happening here? Now we know a little something that, well, okay, tornadoes don't really happen here, so we don't really have to worry about that. And if they did, we get the little weather app start buzzing on my phone and say, okay, take shelter, and hey, there's a good one with a Starbucks right on the corner of 23rd. We have all of that. These people had none of that. They're trying to tell stories to figure out what the hell it all means. Take a look at something here. Where'd he go? Oh, not again. Sunday, February 6th. It's Babe Ruth's birthday. I don't know why I know that. Let's get to the flood here. Okay. Noah was 600 years old when the flood came. Old men love to complain about the weather. Water over the earth, and Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives came into the ark because of the waters of the, that says food, but it should be flood, of the clean animals and of the animals that were not clean, and of the fowl and of all that crawls upon the ground. Two each came to Noah into the ark, male and female, as God had commanded Noah. And of course, everybody who's read the chapter immediately preceding this, where he gets the actual instructions, you realize that there are two sets of instructions, and they're kind of contradictory, and they're both in there for some reason, but we all pretend they're not. And you remember the 2x2, because that's so adorable. But then the other is just like, well, why is that there? I don't know. So it's not really history. And it happened after 7 days that the waters of the flood were over the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day. Now that makes it sound like history, like you can find that on your Google Calendar. Never trust numbers in a scriptural document because the ancient world was kind of nutty with number theory and different patterns, and they are almost all significant in ways that have absolutely nothing to do with counting. Noah is the 10th generation from Adam, not because people sit there and counted out the babies, but because 10 is a perfect number. And on the other side of this, you're going to find that there are 10 generations between Noah and Abraham. Coincidence, right? Numbers mean nothing. All the well springs of the great deep burst, and the casements of the heavens were open. Again, you flip back to Genesis 1, when all the world was a welter and a waste, or whatever it is this translation makes it, and you will see that it was mostly water. And God's first act was of separating the water from the land, of pushing back the deep, and land arises in its place. Water is chaos. And again, if you've ever been on a small boat out in the middle of a storm, you're susceptible to that idea. But you will see these terms repeatedly from Genesis 1. Because the story of Noah is Genesis 2.0. This is the recreation, God's do-over. And the rain was over the earth 40 days and 40 nights. That very day, Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and 3 wives of his sons. Notice you name the boys first, and then you get down in age order down to the women. Sexism. Sons together with them came into the ark, they as well as the beasts of each kind and cattle of each kind, and each kind of crawling thing that crawls on the earth, and each kind of bird. Repetition. Each kind, 2 by 2, distinctions, organization, differences of each kind. In the instructions to build the ark that God gives, remarkably precise in terms of measurement, which again incidentally points to Mesopotamian origin because the Hebrews were not particularly well known as a seafaring people. So they would not have very specific ideas about shipbuilding, but whoever wrote this story initially sure as hell did. But that ship is designed to be essentially a large cube with many little cubicles within it to keep everything separate, keep everything in its place. Very good. Of each kind, distinct, difference. It's almost as if human beings, from the very beginning, like to point out how different we are from one another. And it's almost as if the people telling these stories, carting them around, making the young people learn the lessons that they are providing about the stories, the interpretations. It's almost as if those people were really interested in keeping everything in its place too. Nah, that couldn't be it. Old people never give us the bad ideas. Look at this. And the waters surged most mightily over the earth, and all the high mountains under the heavens were covered. 15 cubits above them, the waters surged as the mountains were covered. And all that flesh that stirs on the earth perished. The fowl and the cattle and the beasts and all swarming things that swarm upon the earth, and all humankind, all that had the quickening breath of life in its nostrils, of all that was on dry land, died. And he wiped out all existing things from the face of the earth, from humans to cattle to crawling things to the fowl of the heavens. They were wiped out from the earth, and Noah alone remained, and those with him in the ark. And the waters surged over the earth 150 days. Wow! That's a page turner. That's gripping. Yes, a little repetitive, but it's dramatic. Notice all of this stirring language involving you, telling you all about the danger and the excitement and the fear, and summoning that kind of terror before the almighty wrath of God. The Bible is a little inconsistent, you will see, in its narratives. Sometimes it's really, really, really involving, gripping. It is a close read. It grabs you by the collar and says, this is happening. It's like reading Stephen King, quite frankly, where you're just in it. The house could be burning down around you. You don't know. You're just sitting there. Oh my God, this is so cool. Why is it doing that? Why? Why is it bringing the thunder here? Literally. It's trying to shake you. It's trying to grip you by the collar. It's trying to involve you. The ability to grip you close and make you feel a certain way about what you're reading. To get caught up in it. Where sometimes you even suspend some disbelief. You know, we're all susceptible to that. Tell me a good story and I won't necessarily pay attention to stuff. I'll become emotionally invested in it. Through fear or wonder, love or divine bliss. I love particularly this. And he wiped out all existing things from the face of the earth. Whoa. Is that a microaggression? I'm not sure. Macroaggression, certainly. Wiped out all existing things. And then the catalog of what he has wiped out to give you a sense of the scope. And it is this same sweeping language told in simple clauses. He wiped out all existing things from the face of the earth. He could have put a period there. Could have. That pretty much covers everything. All existing things from the face of the earth. That's a categorical statement. You don't need to really subdivide after that. But he does. Why? And I'm using he rhetorically here. Could be a female author, unlikely, More likely, it is many, many authors over many, many centuries. From humans to cattle to crawling things to the fowl of the heavens. We've already covered those, but he repeats. What?
I think that he writes like repeatedly is kind of like mind controlling. The more he repeats, he persuades like the mind of everybody.
Yeah. Repetition has this sort of hypnotic effect. Think about, let's say, meditation. What is your mantra? What do you repeat to yourself to bring on a kind of trance-like state? Repetition is very, 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 very powerful. And he wiped out all existing things from the face of the earth, blah, 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 this, and this. They were wiped out from the earth. Repetition, driving that home. And the scale and the scope of that single sentence, driving home, no, everything. And then what does he do? You've got super wide angle. All of creation. Gone! How do you get an audience? Where do you go with an audience from that?
Except for
Bring it in close. You go from super wide angle to close. You lead it. And you say, Noah alone remained. And then he tags on with, oh yeah, and his family. You know, he's yada-yada-ing Noah's whole family, but you know, who cares? But the effect of that. Now, what does that tell us about this text? The fact that it's playing these dramatic games. It is employing rhetoric to stir your emotions, to bring you along with this sweeping, almost incantatory rhythm that overwhelms you. And then turns it on a dime and brings it close. These are rhetorical tricks, quite frankly. Tricks is a cheap word, but this is what literature does. So, regardless of spiritual belief, regardless of historical context, those are very complicated areas that we're really not going to go into. But here, we don't need to be at all familiar with anything. We are reading this on first blush right here. We can look at it and say, well, okay, what can I make of this? What is this text doing? Not what is it doing to me? You're smart people. You're college students. You should be aware of what things are doing to you. You don't have to know what they are, you have to know how you react to them. Justin.
I think it's like it's assigning a ridiculous amount of power to whoever started telling these stories, and it's attempting to answer questions that everybody in life has. So it's like less of a persuasion and, like we were talking about, more of a dramatized answer.
Yeah. He's not laying out an argument.
Yeah.
This isn't a Wikipedia entry. This is stories your grandparents tell you at bedtime to try and shape who you are. Some of them are, Good advice. God comes to you and says, I'm going to wipe out everything unless you build a boat. It's a good idea to build a damn boat. But you're right in that this develops an awful lot of power. And just think of the power that this text has. Specific, not even like the whole Bible, because you can go all sorts of places with that. But where we started with this, Noah, the guy with the boat and the animals. Everybody loves animals, right? It's charming. It's innocuous. It's probably one of the most popular, like, little kid Bible books. I remember having one when I was a little kid, little golden book that said Noah's Ark on it. It had little cartoon drawings of all the animals peeking out of the boat. And it was adorable. And that's what I remembered growing up. But then when you actually come to the real text and you start going through it, you go, huh? There were 2 sets of instructions? That makes no sense. Why did the editor scratch those out? Come on. Any editor working today would go through this and say, way too much repetition. You're going to lose the audience. The reader is not going to sit through that. You're repeating the same thing again and again and again and again and again. Come on. Red pencil those things the hell out of there. But if you take a story honed in multiple laboratories of culture for centuries, first probably transmitted orally, and then at some point those were written down, and then at some point later different versions of that written account get brought together, and somebody's in charge ultimately, and here's power, of saying this version and this version. This version. And more as you see, as you go through this, with the parallel instructions, well, this version, we'll just slip this one right in behind it. Let people wonder what it's about. Let them argue. That's another point that you have to bear in mind as we go through everything. There never is an official interpretation. There's never even, in the very ancient stuff, a really official version. There are choices being made. And you can see, the more you study this stuff, the more you can see, well, that is a choice. Why would they make that? What is the effect of that? You start to think. You start to break it down. You start to wonder, what could it mean? I know what people are telling me in the little storybook version of it, but put that aside. What can I make out of this text? What can I deduce about the people who put this text together? What can I conjecture the people who put this together want me to think about? I'm allowed to break that down.